The Dendy console. Dendy Russian Dendy is a series of home video game consoles, an unofficial hardware clone of the third-generation Famicom console from Japanese company Nintendo. Dendy were produced by Steepler since the end of 1992 and were assembled in Taiwan from Chinese components and were mainly sold in Russia. Over time, the series of consoles also began to be assembled at the Subor Chinese factory and at the Tenzor Russian factory in Dubna town. The consoles were based on Japanese hardware design and cartridge format, different from the American ones. The Dendy lineup was divided into two categories, the basic Dendy Classic and the budget Dendy Junior, which differed in design, quality, and price. The Classic was a copy of the Micro Genius console of Taiwan TXC Corporation and were produced in the same factory. The Junior was made using cheaper technology specifically for the Steepler and used a system on a chip. A Dendi Pro version with one wired and one wireless gamepad was also planned to be released, but it ended up being on sale in only one small batch. Since neither the Famicom nor Nintendo Entertainment System were ever officially sold in the former USSR, the Dendy achieved great popularity in the region. It was promoted through television programs and video game magazines. The name Dendy became a household name in Russia and began to be applied not only to the rest of the Famicom hardware clones, but also to other consoles. After the bankruptcy of Steepler, sales of the original Dendy ceased in 1998, and at the time, according to various estimates, between 1.5 and 6 million units were sold. It is believed that it created a market for video games and game consoles in Russia. History. Beginning. In 1992, a businessman, Viktor Saviuk, came to Steepler Company with a proposal to create and sell TV game consoles together with removable game cartridges under the Dendy trademark. Before that, the company had been supplying Hewlett-Packard products, system integration, and localizing the Windows 3.x operating systems into Russian with the Sir-Win package. The company's founders planned to develop a gaming division, and in September 1992, Saviuk joined a newly established division. Saviuk established contacts with Taiwanese console manufacturers and expressed interest in their products. Steepler did not consider selling the original Famicom, as it was 3 times more expensive than the bootleg clones, and Nintendo was not interested in the CIS country's market. Eventually, Steepler made a deal with TXC Corporation, a Taiwanese firm that produced Famicom clones, and sold them under the Micro Genius brand. The first console sold by Steepler under the Dendi brand was the Micro Genius Icumenis 501, which went on sale as the Dendy Classic. Coming up with the name, Saviuk chose the English word for dandy, a man who emphasizes physical appearance, refined language, and leisurely hobbies. The letter A was replaced by an E for easier reading in Russian. The mascot of the console, Elephant Dendy, was drawn by Russian animator Ivan Maximov. The console got its own commercial on Russian TV with the slogan Dendy, Dendy, we all love Dendy, everybody plays Dendy. The Nestchistny Sluchai music band recorded the commercial, with the music written by keyboardist Sergei Chekrezhov. Animation for the clip was also made with the band. The commercial started running 2 weeks before the start of sales and was broadcast by Video International. Dendy went on sale on December 17, 1992, at a price of 39,000 rubles, $94. However, a mistake was made when introducing the device to the market, and as a result, the first batch came with the PALI video standard, while the second DK standard was required instead. The whole first batch had to be repaired in Moscow, and the video standard had to be replaced. The first branded stores opened in Moscow, on Petrovka Krasnaya Prasnaya, and in the passage to GUM from the Titrolnaya metro station. By February 1993, sales were up to 3,000 consoles a month. Games were also turning a profit, and Steepler managers began traveling to the regions to find regional dealers and purchase advertising. Demand turned out to be very high, and in April 1993 Steepler already had 4 regional dealers and a turnover of 500 million rubles $722,000. By the fall of 1993, up to 4,000 consoles were being sold per day, and a study of consumer demand found that in the consumer electronics category, Dendy was in third place after the refrigerator and television set. By this time, the console had become a household name and began to be applied not only to the other hardware clones of the Famicom, but to other consoles as well. Steepler filled a virtually unoccupied niche, and the world manufacturers of computer games and consoles were not interested in Russia at that time. It had to fight not for demand. The main competitor were gray imports of similar products made in China. By the end of 1994, the turnover for the whole year reached $75.80 million. Steepler eventually suspended the advertising campaign because demand exceeded supply. Magazines and TV shows. While exploring the print press market, Steepler came across the magazine titled Video Ace Computer Games and suggested that the publisher should start a joint publication. As a result, the first issue of Video Ace Dendy, edited by Valery Polyakov, came out in the summer of 1993. The first 7 issues of the magazine were advertising brochures for Steepler products. Under an agreement with the French publisher Hachette Philippeki Press, the magazine also reprinted articles from the French magazines Joypad and Joystick. Later, in addition to articles on Dendy products, the magazine also added articles on the Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo game consoles, which were also sold by Steepler. After funding delays, the contract to publish the magazine was terminated, and Steepler launched its own magazine, Dendy, The New Reality, published by the Taiwan magazine editorial staff. 6 issues later, Dendy, The New Reality magazine closed down completely, and the editors of the closed Video Ace Dendy magazine resumed publication under the name Veliki Draken, independently of Steepler. Beginning in September 1994, the television program Dendy, The New Reality, was launched on Tuxwo TV channel by Steepler. The host was Sergei Supanev, who had previously hosted Time of Stars and Call of the Jungles. Each episode featured games for Dendy, Mega Drive, and Super Nintendo. The show received high ratings and was very popular. After 33 episodes, the program ended, and 2 months later, it was resumed on the ORT channel as a second season under the abbreviated title The New Reality. The second season paid less attention to Dendy games, and in January 1996, the last episode aired. Reasons for the closure were cited as unfortunate airtime, 3:45 p.m. on Fridays, as not all children were home or watching TV at that time, and the production costs for each episode rose from $50,000. Shortly after The New Reality closed, NTK TV channel launched a TV program called Dendy World, hosted by Semyon Furman and Sergei Gvozdev, which closed after 12 episodes. A contract with Nintendo, competition and downfall. In 1994, 100,000–125,000 consoles were sold each month, and the monthly turnover was $5 million. By 1995, the company hired singer Oleg Gazmanov and his son Rodion to continue advertising. In addition, Argus Animation Studio was hired to produce a short animated film, The Adventures of Dendy the Elephant. A TV show consisting of 13 episodes was also planned, but was never finished. Saviuk later said that the company discovered that user loyalty was over 80%, and that no advertising was needed at that rate. 3 new divisions were opened: Steepler Graphics Center for creating computer graphics, Steepler Trading for selling computer hardware, and a center for training programmers. Steepler soon reorganizes, which resulted in Steepler Trading's retail chain being spun off into a separate company, Lamport. In 1994, Steepler wanted to gain support from Nintendo and tried to establish contact with its European division through its regional office in Germany. After a period of ignoring contacts, Nintendo learned about the popularity of 8-bit console clones in Russia, so they contacted Steepler in the spring of 1994 and invited Viktor Saviuk to a meeting in Seattle with Nintendo of America executives Minoru Arakawa and Howard Lincoln. After many days of negotiations, Steepler reached an agreement with Nintendo, under which it gave up promotion of Sega products and received exclusive rights to distribute Super Nintendo Entertainment System and Game Boy consoles in Commonwealth of Independent States and all post-Soviet states. Under this agreement, Nintendo also relinquished its claim to Dendy sales. At the end of 1994, Steepler had two competitors, Lamport, which began to produce its own Kenga console, and Bitman, which bought Famicom, Mega Drive, and Game Boy clones from Taiwan. Kenga distinguished itself by offering the Ken Boy portable console, while Bitman signed a formal agreement with Sega, under which it began selling licensed Mega Drive 2, Sega Saturn, and the educational Sega Pico. Both companies closed their game business a year and a half later. Kenga repositioned itself as a children's goods store, and Bitman was bought out by the R-Style company. In January 1995, sales dropped noticeably, and an investigation revealed that competitors had started buying consoles in China and were able to reduce prices below the cost of Dendy consoles. At the time, Dendy was still being manufactured in Taiwan. In addition, Subor, a Chinese company, entered the market. Subor had previously approached Steepler with a proposal for cooperation, but was rejected. With the support of the Chinese government, Subor opened an office in Moscow and engaged in dumping. After that, Subor proposed to Steepler to transfer the production to the Subor factory, making the wholesale price $8.09 as compared to the previous $12 at the Taiwanese factory. The terms were accepted, and an order was placed for 80,000 Dendy consoles at factories in China. In addition, Steepler gained the right to exclusively distribute the Subor SB-225 and SB-225B through its stores, and sales returned to previous levels. In November 1995, Dendy had 10 subsidiaries in the regions and 80 dealers, and retail prices for the consoles dropped to $20. After the mid-1990s, the 16-bit Mega Drive and Super Nintendo consoles began to give way in the West to next-generation consoles, such as the first PlayStation. In Russia, the era of 8-bit consoles was also coming to an end. Steepler planned to start selling various consumer electronics, such as DVD players, under the Dendy brand. However, those plans fell through when Steepler won a tender to automate the state Duma. Due to opposition from the Federal Agency of Government Communications and Information and assassination attempts on employees, Steepler lost contracts with government agencies and went bankrupt in 1996. The Dendy division survived as a separate company, even though working capital was held in Steepler accounts, and faced great difficulties. For a time, suppliers sold goods to the company on credit, but when that ran out, Dendy was forced to sell stock exclusively for months. Eventually, when the 1998 Russian financial crisis hit, the company closed completely. It is estimated that between 1.5 and 2 million Dendy consoles were sold in Russia, while other estimates range up to 6 million. The console gained nostalgic status among those growing up in Russia in the 1990s, similar to the Nintendo and Sega consoles of the same era in the United States. At the time, the name Dendy became synonymous with game consoles that plugged into a television set, and it is believed that it was Dendy that created the video game and game console market in Russia, and that it gave rise to the first generation of Russian gamers. Its popularity also led to the appearance of pirated Dendy clones produced by other manufacturers. As of 2021, Dendy are collector's items among enthusiasts. In addition, they are popular among retro gaming fans in Russia. Models. Models. Dendy was produced in several modifications. In general, the lineup was divided into two categories, the Basic Classic and the Budget Junior. The first console of the series was a copy of the Taiwanese micro-genius Icumenus 501, the design of which was based on the twin Famicom from Sharp. Taiwan's TXC Corporation reimagined the twin Famicom design and made the console more compact. Steepler rebranded the Icumenus 501 as the Dendy Classic and released it on December 17, 1992. In the summer of 1993, the Dendy Junior was released, which became a simplified version of Classic for younger children. The company decided that it was necessary to create a console so cheap that it would be more profitable for wholesalers to buy it from Steepler than from Chinese suppliers. The Dendy Junior was created using cheaper technology and used a system on a chip. The console was originally designed by TXC Corporation on request specifically for Steepler to compete with the suppliers of Chinese clones, which were of low quality and sold cheaper. The design of the console was copied from the original Famicom, and the box design was done by Rustam Adagamov. The Dendy Junior had a wholesale price of $29, and after its release, Classic sales went up. The next model was the Dendy Junior Roman II, which had a rounded case similar to the Dendy Junior, but the gamepads were non-detachable, and the second of them lacked the start and select buttons. It was accompanied by the Dendy Junior IP, which featured a light gun, similar in appearance to the NES Zapper, and a multi-game cartridge. After the Junior Roman II, the Dendy Junior IVP went on sale, which missed out on the Junior Roman III name because unknown competitors had released a modified Junior Roman II model under that name. Steepler decided not to compete with them and immediately released the Junior IVP in black, made of cheaper plastic, and with a light gun similar to the Beretta M9 included. The final model in the series was the Dendy Classic Roman II, based on the Micro-Genius Icumenus 502, with a new rounded design and new game pads. The console was more expensive than the regular Junior versions and was in low demand. There were also plans to release Dendi Pro, based on the Micro-Genius Icumenus 1000, which featured one wired and one wireless gamepad. Saviuk described it to Commercant newspaper as a console that would compete with the best Japanese 8-bit consoles, but in the end, he said it only went on sale in a limited batch of 1,000-1,200 units, which sold poorly. Game cartridges. Since the Dendy is a clone of the Famicom, it allows to run games originally created for the Famicom. In addition, a large number of pirated copies of NES games, homemade hacked versions of games, and so-called multi-game cartridges, such as 99 in 1, were released for the Dendy. However, often most of the games in the multi-game cartridges did not work, and the rest were essentially copies of the same game with minor variations. The first versions of the Dendy cartridges were sold in cases labeled TV Game Cartridge and with a dust cover. The most popular was the cartridge with gulls, which contained 9,999 games to one, and in addition to the menu with flying gulls flying over the sea depicted, it also contained an 8-bit arrangement of the Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers. The game library for Dendy was a mix of games for different regions, selling versions for both the American, Japanese, and European regions. In addition to these, unofficial games by Chinese developers were also sold. Dendy's cartridges did not have memory for saving, so the games which had them, such as Final Fantasy, The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid, never reached the Russian market. Over time, Steepler's Dendy cartridges became of collector's interest and a collector's market developed, with prices for game cartridges reaching tens of thousands of rubles as of 2021. Many pirate Dendy games were often created by combining elements from other games and were named after a famous game series, although they actually had nothing to do with it. Such games included Street Fighter V, Contra 6, and Robocop Roman 4. Many Chinese developers also created copies of games from other consoles for the Dendy and other Famiclones, such as Street Fighter Roman 2, Mortal Kombat, and various variants of Disney interactive games. Perhaps the most famous of the pirated games released for Dendy is Somri, based on Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega Mega Drive and developed in Taiwan. However, the game has been slowed down compared to the original. Elements from Sonic the Hedgehog 2 had been included in the game, and the protagonist instead of Sonic is Mario wearing Tails' boots. When copying official games, pirates often changed their code and removed the logos of the game companies, which often triggered copy protection that made the game completely unplayable or much more difficult. The most famous examples are Bucky O'Hare for its extremely high difficulty, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Roman 3, The Manhattan Project, where the final boss Shredder became immortal and impossible to beat. Literature. George Florin 2020. Historia Nintendo. Nega 3. Famicom. ISBN 978-5,604,370,148.